You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 594. For tonight, we're going to break down the first issue of Legacy of Vader. This is a series, ongoing series from Marvel, in the head of Kylo Ren, someone who we don't know a lot about, although we know quite a bit about as well. So this is very exciting. I'm really eager to talk about this, and I'm excited to see where the series goes. And to help me do all this, of course, is Jonesy. Jonesy, welcome to the show. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic. Happy New Comic Book Day to you, sir. How are you today?
And to you and to those who celebrate. No, this is great. It's, we're kind of in this period of no Star Wars television. So to have something like this to kind of take that place is kind of precious because I think there's some good stuff in here. But
yeah, it's always fun to keep in touch with the comic books because we talked about this a lot over the years of there's always really cool angles you can get from it. And even the series that don't always hit the mark, there's always something you can grab from most of them. There's some that maybe not, but most of them you can grab something from it, especially these ones that are more kind of flagship oriented a little bit. And so, and this one's maybe we won't call it flagship, but I think it's about a key character. And there's been some legacy with some of the Kylo Ren comics in the past that have been nice. So it's definitely encouraging to be able to see some of this come to the forefront again and kind of during like you said, kind of during a lull time too.
Yeah. And we've got a full house already building here in the chat, but go ahead. I know you want to say thank you to some fine folks and acknowledge some of the folks that are in the chat with us tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, welcome back, everybody. It's been a couple weeks since we did a show, so thanks for joining us, especially our Patreon members, cantinacast.com/Patreon. If you're interested in the show, you could join some of these amazing people like our now part of the tribe members, Alex, Raphael, Danny, Mike, Lauren, Dante, Riss, Jackson, Sharkman, Dan, Dez, Isabella, Uncle Leon, Josh, Jacob, and Reader Reborn. And of course, our Delusions Granger members, our top tier folks. Now, this is Rod Racing, CJ, Steve, and Rob. And if you're listening to the podcast, thanks for the download. If you'd like to come out and visit the live stream, cantinacast.com/YouTube, we'll bring you out to the live stream and you could join some of these amazing folks like Andrew, Fall Asleep Fast. I love that name. My Star Wars guys, One versus CPU, Alex, Gary, Sky, Steph sneaking in here at the very end. If we didn't catch you this time, we'll catch you on the back end. But welcome, everyone. We hope you enjoy the show.
Yeah. And thank you for, this is your first time with us, thank you so much for being here. Hopefully this is something you enjoy and we can keep bringing you a show every week. So let's see, just quickly we've got a Patreon show coming up. We'll pick that up on Sunday. So back with Patreon. I don't know. I had a couple ideas in there and I thought, no, Jonesy's going to kill me. So we need to talk about that because I don't know how much I want to sign him up for just yet. It could be anything from Vader Immortal, which I thought would be fun to talk about since we're kind of going there with this comic in some ways. Or it might be fun to talk about a particular character who looks a lot like a Bomar monk now that we've known from comics in the past. So all that will be coming, but we'll have a special show for Patreon members exclusively on Sunday night. Okay,
really,
now let's.
Are you really talking about a character dissection for Vane?
Yeah, man. Yeah, sure. Vane, why not?
Oh my gosh.
Okay. Well, again, we'll talk about it after the show. All right, let's see. Hey, why don't we get into this? So we're going to do this. We're going to do non-spoilers real quick, just some high-level thoughts, opinions without getting into the gory details. And then after that, we'll give the, proverbial warning and really just kind of break down everything that happens in this comic book. So Jonesy, I'll kick it off to you first. Why don't you, initial thoughts, non-spoiler thoughts about this first issue?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think going into this, there's a few positives I think people should take from this. I think one, Charles Soule is the writer on this comic, which is, we all know Charles Soule really well. We've loved what he's done. We were huge fans, of course, for his run on the Vader series in particular. We thought it was amazing in establishing that character and really kind of redefining Vader for us, I think, in many ways in some of those storylines, which I thought was fantastic. So it's really cool to see his excitement and the continuation of the Vader lineage with Kylo Ren and that tie and some of the comments that he's made there on social media and whatnot. So exciting to see Charles Soule in the mix. That's always encouraging when you have a strong writer that we have a lot of confidence in to be able to come and do that. I think if you first of all, Derek Chew on this cover is a banger. I mean, this is just an absolute banger. I absolutely love this cover. And if you're a collector, there's actually two covers I would point you to that I think are stellar as well. And one would be John Jiang, I believe you pronounce his name. It's Kylo Ren kind of holding like almost like a broadsword in front of him.
Oh,
It's just
yeah.
very dynamic. And then Annie Wu has one as well that is very much a callback to the way that the Soule comics have been a couple of times with Vader with all the squiggly lines. And so it's very reminiscent of that with Kylo Ren with the helmet on in a similar fashion, not exactly, but similar. So if you're a fan of kind of that imagery, Annie Wu's cover, and then Derek Tube for issue 3, another banger, by the way, absolute killer with Vader in the background and this really clear cloud green smoke. So solicit's already open for all of that. So I encourage you there too if you're into the covers. I think also, Luke Ross, I'm not always a fan of Luke Ross's faces, but man, some of the imagery, I love the camera angles that he does.
Yeah.
As well as like some of the imagery we have on Mustafar. And again, we can't really show this because today is release day. We're being respectful of what Marvel gives us these advanced copies to be able to bring to you guys this quickly. But some of the scenery that we got on Mustafar in particular, I thought was absolutely stellar and really dynamic and really cool. With the story itself, this is one we're going to have to kind of see where this goes, right? It sounds like this is going to be an ongoing series rather than a mini series, although I'm seeing some conflicting evidence of that online. But everything we keep reading, even from Marvel, says it's an ongoing monthly series.
Yeah.
So positives and negatives with that. If it's an ongoing series, it's going to drag out. This is set between Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker. So this, what is it, about a year between those movies, I believe? Is that right? Was it a year or 2 years?
No, this picks up like right after the Battle of Crait.
No. But what's the timeline between Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker?
Yeah, more or less.
Like a year, right?
Yeah, it's not much.
Yeah. So if this series ties all of that together, then we kind of look at where Kylo Ren was at with the Battle of Crait, all the way up to when we see him on Exegol and Rise of Skywalker, right? So what does that story really look like? What's motivating him? The helmet and why he reforging it. So we expect to see some of that. We're getting a very basic flavor for that in this issue, though. This is straight off of what we have with Battle of Crait and his coming back and kind of reasserting himself and understanding what he's doing. But you start to see some of that struggle with Kylo Ren about what does it mean to be the leader of to be Supreme Leader? What does it mean to have this legacy of Vader? Why is he not satisfied? Right. So, and then all the whiny stuff, that comes out of the good and the bad with Kylo Ren. Right. So this is an issue that's kind of going to set the stage for us more so than really answer any questions. So it's going to be one of these next couple of 3 issues are going to really outline where we're at with it. But it was an okay start. I think overall, I think there's definitely some areas in here that are interesting to really dive into, but we're going to have to just kind of see where this character goes overall. So I want to kind of put any kind of rating or anything on that, but kind of an interesting start. So we'll have to see where this goes. What about you?
Well, I loved it. I thought it was great. I thought it was a great start to the series. Kylo Ren is a character that has a wealth of potential storytelling behind him because he is one of the more complex characters, and we know so much about him, and yet there are large portions of his persona, his personality, that we do not know. We don't really get in his head very often, and this is an opportunity here, kind of piggybacking on what you said here about Charles Soule especially, right? Charles Soule is somebody who gave us so much insight into what was really going on with Vader or Anakin Skywalker, if you will, throughout all the years, and leading up into his death. And there's an opportunity to do the very same thing here to kind of mature that character, grow that character in a lot of different ways, and give us a lot of different dynamics about the character that we kind of assume happened or assume were there. There's probably no other way to explain some of the complexities of his character. And so therefore it gives Charles Soule that opportunity to kind of have that open book and really start telling some really cool tales and really intriguing stories about what makes him tick. I think that's where the potential really lies. Going back to what you said, the artwork, the covers are great. I thought the artwork was pretty good. It especially excelled when we got to Mustafar. That whole battle sequence when he's fighting, and again, we're not going to get into heavy spoilers, so don't worry. But there's parts of that where it's just like, they look like storyboards or something, or cinematic boards from a movie, and how they were drawn and sketched up, which I really, really enjoyed a lot.
What even the flashback scene that we'll talk about, I think that was really expertly done as well.
No, for sure. So yeah, I love the fact that he's in there. I love the fact that we're getting in Kylo Ren's head. We're going to get to see a lot of, I expect him to grow. We talked about this before we came on, or very briefly, about did he really develop as a character from The Last Jedi to The Rise of Skywalker? And I think for me, it's always been, yes, he has. but it wasn't really, it's not in your face, right? He seems very similar outside of the fact that, he's now the supreme leader. He's now gone back to wearing the helmet, which was really a point of contention and discussion for us when we first saw that, right? We went back and forth. I don't know how many episodes, and there was a lot of conversations at large about why he would even do that, given where his character ended up at. But there's things like that that I feel like are stories to be told, and I think we're going to see that. So we're going to see him struggling with everything from getting his butt whooped from Uncle Luke to feeling betrayed by somebody he thought he had a future with. And then on top of all that, he's being thrust into this position of supreme leader, the most arguably, if the most powerful, fleet force, if you will, in the galaxy. And he's he's got that contention going on with Hux, and we get to see some of that there. And I kind of am interested to see where that goes a little bit more. He's never had this much power at his disposal ever before. And suddenly he's now in charge of everything. And the way he goes about showing how much he has power, as we'll talk about in this episode, I thought was pretty brutal, and while at the same time speaks volumes about where he is. I didn't want to cut you. We want to get something in there.
No, I was just laughing at your choice of words. He was thrust into this position of power. No, he seized this position of power.
Well, no,
unilaterally, and then lied about it later.
In his defense, she made him do it, right? So, no, I'm kidding. That's what he says. That's what he says in the comic.
Sure.
And that's not a spoiler, because if you saw the Marvel preview, that where it covers all that.
Right.
And then the last part of it, I guess. So one of the key moments is we're kind of going back to development and maybe the lack thereof that we think or do not think exists between the two movies there. This whole idea of killing the past, right, was just his mantra throughout The Last Jedi. And when we get to The Rise of Skywalker, he's kind of dropped all that. Right. He's very focused. He's very focused on Exegol and all of that. And we just kind of had to take that with a grain of salt and just assume that there was something behind all that. But I like that we're going to get to see it. And this first issue gets that out of the way immediately. It kind of gives us what we need to know to understand why is there such a not such a transformation, but a transformation between those two movies. And so I'm eager to know and see more about where that goes. But again, if your only takeaway of all of this is Charles Soule. So he hasn't let me down yet, really. So I am super excited, and it's very promising that we've got him behind this comic. I don't even know I'd feel comfortable with anybody else, honestly, at this point, writing something like this. But those are my initial thoughts.
I would tend to agree with that too. And I think to just drive home your point that you said, kind of the leading off, was we really needed something for Kylo Ren to help us better bridge the character from Last Jedi to Rise of Skywalker, because it did feel... It wasn't really clear what kind of development that happened. We don't know where he was really at over the year. It seemed like he's still kind of this tortured soul, but all of a sudden he's really pissed off and angry.
Right.
And more assertive in some way. So clearly there's a change there, but this is where this kind of content is really necessary, because we didn't get that from the book. We didn't get it from really many other sources. And this is the first direct timeline area that's required for us. And so what I'm hoping with this series is that we don't go off on too many side quests and things like that tend to kind of litter some of the flagship comics like we have in the Star Wars comics, which sometimes are really cool and really fun. And other times it's like they're dragging a little bit as we're trying to fill out the number of issues, right? So I'm hoping we kind of stick to that, so it's always driving the character forward. I think Charles Soule does a good job of that in general, but is it something that's going to keep us really compelled with Kylo Ren? Because honestly, what we've seen on screen was a bit limited in some ways, and that's not shade on Adam Driver. It's more shade on just kind of how the story played out over time, right? So this is an opportunity for us. I'm hoping that we're able to seize it here.
Okay. Well, from here on out, we're going to get into spoilers. So if you've not read the comic and you don't want to be spoiled, now's the time to drop and come back after you've had a chance to read it yourself. Also wanted to say thank you to the fine folks at Marvel for sending us the advanced copies. It's always nice of them, and a lot of fun to be able to put a show like this together quickly, because we wouldn't be able to do it without it. So, all right, let's get into the opening here. Normally we talk about the crawls and stuff, and I think it's pretty much, the crawl does a really good job. And in the comic, when we get to the kind of the in his head and what he's struggling with, it does a really good job of kind of laying out what we talked about, right? He got his butt kicked. He's got the weight of his legacy on his shoulders. He's now the supreme leader. He's being feeling betrayed of sorts because of what happened with him and Rey. But there's just a lot of stuff piled on him, right? So he's kind of at this pivotal kind of watershed moment in his life where he really could kind of go a lot of different ways, but he goes back to what he's used to, right? It's the anger, it's the legacy. I don't want to be tied to any of that stuff anymore. I want to kind of create my own name and be free of the Skywalkers and the Solos and all the pain and everything else that he suffered and went through. Because he's not like a Rey, and he's not like Anakin, where they were nobodies. They came from nothing and they became something. He's got all this other baggage that he feels is holding him back. So it is nice to kind of that Charles Soule does a really good job of kind of establishing that, reminding us of where he is kind of in his mental state. And it really is exemplified in this first series, because he's walking in. This is just moments after the Battle of Crait, I would assume, of a day at most, right? Yeah. And he's walking into this, the Finalizer, which is that First Order flagship. He's walking in. He's got these two crates, no pun intended, two crates floating behind him. He's using the Force to kind of bring him in. And, off to the sides are all the troops. And I think it's Hux who tells him, hey, do you want me to announce you? And he's like, no, I got this. And goes in to basically talk about how, that Snoke was dead. He blames the Resistance as the ones that killed him. He doesn't tell him, oh, I killed him out of pure passion and love. Right. And then he decides to take the bodies, the two portions of Snoke's body, raise them up into the air for all to see, and then ends by saying that, this was the end, meaning Snoke, and then uses the Force to push those two body pieces out into space through the, what's it called? Anyways,
yeah, like
the bay, right? Yeah. Pushes him out into the bay and says, this is the beginning. So very theatrical, very dramatic. I think it sets a point home. I mean, there's almost like a hush of silence. And then suddenly everybody's kind of like cheering, like, okay, yeah, we're going to follow you, because clearly we don't want to end up like that guy over there. But I guess your thoughts on that real quick.
They all kind of all the stormtroopers kind of look at each other like, what is going on here? And you're right, then just kind of cheering and get on board with it. I think this is kind of par for the course for Kylo Ren. So it's very in character, and is of taking a situation where he clearly performed other actions, but he's going to push the narrative that he feels like is the one that's going to get his point across, and to seize this power and control. Because again, he doesn't really know what else to do with any of this stuff except go back to what he continues to know. But as we and that's really about all there is going on there yet, right? We'll kind of come back to that storyline, but then we start to get into more of the tortured soul aspect of Kylo Ren. I think these are some of the more powerful pages, I think, within the series. And I think this is where Luke Ross's art, including face art, which again, typically is not my favorite aspect of his drawing, but some of the stuff with Luke in particular was absolutely spot on and perfect for drawing Luke Skywalker the way that Kylo sees him. Right. And these are echoing the scenes that we see from the Battle of Crait when he's sitting in front of him, as well as some of the flashbacks that we see in Last Jedi in general, as well as some other characters too, Rey, Han Solo, and Leia. But you start to see what's going on in Kylo Ren's head, and just be tearing him apart in some ways. And I feel like this has always been the more potentially interesting aspect of the character, although it does become a bit laborsome in some of the content. I'm not saying that here necessarily, but, at what point do we stop saying that it's his, the burden that he's had? It's really the privileges that he's had that he doesn't want to admit. This the self-ego that he can't quite, quit feeding in some ways, right? So, but I think these were some of the more interesting pages coming up as we start to understand that he's doing the things he thinks is necessary. I'm trying to kill it. I'm trying to let it go. Force himself to let it go. He calls himself quit your whining, you baby, basically, like almost verbatim, right?
Yeah.
And yet he just can't seem to do it. He's like, I've done all the things I'm supposed to do. Why won't this work? And they really kind of expertly frame this, and it's very little dialogue from Charles Soule here, but the imagery goes really well with it to show just kind of the struggle that he's got going on here.
Yeah, and it's in that moment when he's like you said, he's been thinking about all this. He's angry. He's blaming everything on his past. And he can't understand. He can't figure out why nothing's changed for him. So what does he do? He doubles down, triples down at this point, right? He's like, okay, in his mind, he doesn't say it, but it's very clear by the very end of this, or where he goes next with this. In his mind, he hasn't done enough. There has to be more he has to kill in order to truly rid himself of his past, of his legacy. He falls right back into those same patterns. He ignites his lightsaber, and then he calls to Hux, which it's never a good sign when he's angry and then he calls for Hux. And they have this kind of like just quick moment where it was kind of insightful. It's probably intuitive for anybody that would really think about the characters, but we learned that in his relationship with Snoke, he didn't really get a lot of insight into what was going on with the military, tactically and strategically what they were doing, right? Snoke was calling all the shots and basically ordering Hux to do it. And Kylo Ren just kind of played a part in all that, but he really wasn't in the know. He wasn't kind of that, and we kind of saw this, I guess, in the First Order, right? They kind of, the Force Awakens, they had a different type of relationship. I think we used to talk about how they were almost like two sons that were, trying to appease their father half the time. And we can kind of see that here, but it's very clear that he didn't have that. And so he calls Hux in and is asking him like, hey, I didn't really know anything that was going on. So, tell me what Snoke had planned. And Hux's response is very interesting. Instead of saying, here's what was going on, he's like, why do you care? Right? You're now the leader. You're now supreme leader. You have the strongest military force in the galaxy, universe, whatever. Why don't you just go do whatever you want to? And don't forget, he mentions, and don't forget that our forebearers, were the ones that were going to rebuild the empire. And that's like triggering for him because in Hux's mind, he's thinking about Brendel, his father, everything that came. I mean, his father had a pretty long history of serving the empire very loyally and faithfully. But for Kylo Ren, they're not of the same breed, right? He's like, Kylo Ren shuts that down immediately. He's like, look, don't even say, don't speak, take your father's or take my legacy's name out of your mouth kind of thing.
Right.
Because in his mind, it's like, no, you're not a Skywalker. You're not a Solo. You have no idea what I've been through. And he almost kind of, he even insults him and says that his, Brendel and his legacy, they're all a bunch of, bootlickers, right? They're just people that were sheep and did whatever they wanted. They had no real power. They were just under the command of somebody of his pedigree and of his caliber.
I believe the word was lip spittles.
Lip spittles. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. I didn't even know what that was.
Lick spittles, I believe. Lick spittles.
Yeah. But yeah, it's almost kind of, he pretty much puts him in his place at that point. And then I want your thoughts on this because it is kind of interesting and odd at the same time. He leaves Hux with only one task. He's like, okay, we're done here. I just need you to do me one thing, and that's go build me a throne. And, what he leaves, and even leaves it. What does he say? But General, I caution you, get it right the first time. And Hux is left like scratching his head, like, what is this, a trick? Like, what is going on? I mean, this guy's he's been unpredictable, but of all the things that he needs me to do as the general right now, we've got the resistance on the run. They've been, we almost had them outside had it not been for Luke Skywalker. And yet your first order for me as supreme or the general is to go build you a throne kind of thing. It's interesting, but what's your take on that?
I think, the whole sequence is really curious because I think it shows Hux in general, much like we expect, right? He's kind of positioning and angling. He's got his own agenda that he's trying to push. He's not really clear about what that is, but every question that Kylo asks of Hux is not really answered in a straight way. Like you said, he asks, he lays it out there and Hux completely redirects saying, well, how do you want to build this? What's your vision for all of us? And then Kylo asks him about like military might, like where's our strength? Where are our weaknesses? Where are our potential allies? What are the things that we can exploit and leverage? And Hux kind of answers the question. He kind of details at a high level. He's not giving numbers or answering all the questions, but yeah, we have this number. We have Star Destroyers. We're strong here. But with the loss of Starkiller Base, we don't have a shipyard, right? So we need ships. We need that type of thing. But then Hux starts to go and get kind of lofty and starts to ponder a bit with his, fingers to his chin and mouth of like what could possibly be, and like he's in control and he has this power, and Kylo Ren is not going to have any of that. And we kind of saw that at the end of Last Jedi as well, right? At the Battle of Crait, that conflict between them of what Kylo actually believes Hux should be, where his place is. And like you said, the legacy of all of that, of Anakin Skywalker, Darth Vader built the Empire, right? With blood and loss and tears and everything else. And
right.
The rest of them were a bunch of coattail riders.
Yep.
But you're right. So we have all of this. He's like, okay, being a leader, but then he goes straight back to the self-interest and the egotism of, I need a throne and I want it to, like, you have flexibility to do whatever you want, General Hux. like you said, you have one chance, you have right, and you just see the balls of fist and the anger of Hux, like getting the best of him, saying like you're just in his head. There's no dialogue here, but you just see the reaction, and there's no Hux is going mad of like I'm being demeaned and belittled into this yet again by this know nothing bootlicker Kylo
Right.
Ren that is spoiled beyond all belief and hasn't had to work and truly sacrifice. General Hux is on the other side of it, right? Hux was abused by his father in many ways, where Kylo Ren was, you could argue, maybe somewhat abandoned, right? Or
Sure.
some loss there, but at the very least, a child of privilege and struggling with legacy from a completely different perspective.
Yeah.
And Hux just doesn't get it, you know. And that, we're filling a lot of blanks here, but I mean, these are all the things we know the character has thought before, and I think is still captured here with Hux's ambition. And then Kylo Ren's menial nonsense BS that he continues to pull, that absolutely drives Hux nuts.
Yeah. On that note, my Star Wars guys, Robson said he's got a question. Says, I'm surprised that Kylo didn't pull a Vader and just cut Hux down.
Well, and it's a great point, Rob, because Kylo Ren does say, you know, when Hux comes in, he tells, you know, at ease, Hux, and he says, you are, and there's a pause, a trusted advisor,
Right.
which again, you just feel this tension. But I think Kylo understands that in order to exert his power and to be organized, there are so many things he doesn't know. I think he needs Hux right now, even though he doesn't want to need Hux, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And that was my take on it too. Cause there's been many opportunities where he's probably had many opportunities to take out Hux. But I think in some regards, and I even felt this during like The Force Awakens, I think he does, I don't know if respect is the right word, but he at least acknowledges that Hux fills a role for now. And I would imagine, at least now with Snoke out of the way, so Daddy's not around to protect him anymore, I think both he and Hux know that it's imminent. It's only a matter of time before Kylo decides to turn on him, especially in this kind of mental state, right?
Yeah.
I mean, anybody that's able to kill their father as easily as he did is certainly capable and willing to take down somebody like Hux, who's been a thorn in his side and has been somebody who's been competitive with him for a number of years now. So,
right.
But good question there. He kind of retreats at this point after he leaves Hux and tells him to build his throne. He heads back into, I guess, his quarters, and we get more of him with Vader's helmet. This is the melted helmet that he's been talking to and he's picked up. And he's basically just kind of monologuing here about how he said he thought he was Vader's legacy, but that's clearly not what he is. He goes into, it's not Vader, it's not Leia, it's not Solo. He's killed the past, right? This is that whole moment where he's starting to realize, okay, I've already killed everything. I've killed so much of the past. The only thing I can do at this point is just to kill more. And I think part of this too is, I don't know if this is going to be a realization for him, and I don't know if this will actually be entered into the series or this comic, but I always saw this anger as one of the primary things that fuels his dark side power and his potential, right? And if he's really trying to get rid of all of that, does he not know that in essence he could be weakening himself, right? He could not be as strong because what he harbors, all the emotions and all the pain and all the legacy and all the stuff that's in his head that really probably shouldn't even impact him, is what has been fueling his dark side potential. So,
yeah, and we get some text around the very end of this issue as well that basically doubles down on that of the difference between why Kylo Ren has not been successful and why Darth Vader was successful. So we're going to come back to that theme there too. But this is really interesting because it's almost like he's blaming Vader now, right? It's always somebody else, right? And well, I've killed everything, and he's holding up, with the Force, this molten mask, and he's like, I've killed everything, but maybe I need to start with you now. And he's talking to it. And this is where we go off to Mustafar, where you're like, okay, what do you mean? He looks up to Vader. He's modeling everything after this symbolic character of the Empire. He doesn't want to rebuild the Empire, but he wants to somehow impose. So it's this weird, like, do you really know what you want? Like, at the end of the day, Kylo Ren, or Ben Solo, I think, really at the end of the day, really just wants peace. Kylo Ren thinks that's through power, but really effectively the character just wants peace, right? To feel himself and not feel all these burdens of privilege, like I keep pointing out. But I think it's interesting now that he's going to point after his grandfather and kind of target his legacy and destroying that in order to build him up. And this is kind of classic narcissistic, type behavior, right? Where tear down others to build yourself up and make you feel better about your place in things.
Yeah, and I think when I got to this point in the comic book, I thought, okay, well, he's going to Mustafar. I suspect that what he's going to do is go destroy essentially Vader's castle and rid himself, right? Wipe Vader's legacy, any remnants of Vader off the out of the galaxy, completely scrub him out. Which is, I think, that was my take. Is that what you were thinking he was going to do, or do you think he was just in search of like knowledge, or wasn't really sure what next steps were at that point?
His actual intent, I'm not sure I have quite clarity around that, but I do agree with you. I think he was going to destroy the castle and whatever might be there that's a remaining legacy of his, make sure that crumbles with it. So
yeah,
I think general intent, absolutely agree with you there.
Okay. Well, he does end up going to Mustafar. He gets at the castle. There's a kind of a quick panel where we see Vanny, or Vanny, I'm not sure even how that's pronounced, honestly, but we'll come back to that character in just a little bit because it's a different take on the Vanny that we've seen in past. And this is where I was like, oh my God, this is cool. And I posted this on social media because I was like, holy crap, I got to break out the Rise of Skywalker, the visual dictionary, because I could not remember. So if you guys remember at the very beginning of the Rise of Skywalker, you see Kylo Ren kind of slaughtering these cultists here that you see. I've got it picked up for anybody that's watching the video. And I could not remember what their background was or what it was, why were they there? It was just kind of all of a big mystery. But essentially these guys were kind of guards, right? They worshiped Vader, essentially. And when Vader was gone, they took it upon themselves to kind of set up around there and protect it, make sure that no one tried to go, grave digging or looting, or if you will, or whatever. So they were beholden to Vader. They really saw him in the highest light, almost immortalized him in a lot of ways. And so he's met by them. And this is where, there's not a lot of really words here. This is a lot of action sequences, a lot of action panels, basically Kylo Ren fighting these guys. And he cuts them down with a lot of ease, very similar to what we saw at the very beginning of the Rise of Skywalker. But this was really where I felt like the artwork shined. There's some great moments, and there's some great shots, and just the layouts are fantastic and beautiful. It was really great stuff from Marvel, and certainly from was it Luke Ross as the artist.
If you're a fan of some of the like Batman comics in particular from DC,
that's a good point.
Where you have these really dark, raining, like grittier views of things. And actually in a couple of these, Kylo Ren almost looks like Batman. I think on the first establishing shot, he almost looks like he has a cowl on.
Yeah.
But if that's your bag, if that's kind of your art style, or you really like and appreciate that, I think you'll really like these few panels or these few pages here with these panels, because you're right. I think this is where the use of colors too. I think the colorists often get overlooked here, but the oranges and the browns, it's very earthy in tone, and I think they just really strike the right tone here for the entire thing. But Batman was what kept coming to mind quite a bit, which I very much enjoy, because I think that grittiness is what we need anytime we visit Mustafar. And it's not quite the black and red that we're kind of used to seeing with Mustafar. It's almost like there's a dullness to the planet and to these areas that, since Vader's death, is maybe losing some of its luster. That was just kind of an interesting take on the imagery.
Yeah. Steven Films has said the panel of Kylo slaughtering those protectors of Vader's castle was inspired by an unused concept from the Rise of Skywalker, where Kylo was going to fight those protectors at the stairway too. So yeah, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe the one question I have for you, Howard, is that, so what we see in the beginning part of Rise of Skywalker, where he's slaughtering them in the forest to get the Wayfinder and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you think that's any way a flashback or something that's going on here as well, or is this the completely unrelated events and unrelated timing in some of this, and that really is closer to the actual events of Rise of Skywalker that we see in the movie, not what we're seeing here in the book?
I could be wrong, and I could be proven wrong by the end of this series, but my take would be, at least now, I think that does happen in real time. So I think that is all kind of after everything that we're going to see here as part of this series. I think what this does is just kind of establish that, look, they don't like him and he doesn't like them, and they're probably going to always have this kind of relationship. I don't know if he ever comes back and has to fight these guys. We'll get into that in a second, because he's now talking to Vanny, and I've got questions about what Vanny really wants from him. But I think that's just going to be the relationship. I don't know that Vanny and these guys really have a relationship either, right? I think they're probably just, he's living inside, living his best life as, idolizing Vader now that he's head in a jar. And these guys are out there just trying to make sure that no one comes by and tries to disturb, the castle or any of the relics or anything else that was that belonged to Vader.
He did seem to command them, or at least it suggested that he's commanding them. So maybe it's possible that they are in cahoots, as they like to say.
Yeah. I mean, maybe they have a relationship
at this point. Yeah, there's something there, right? Yeah. Okay, I was just curious. I kind of agree with you. I think the scenes we see at the beginning of the third movie of the sequel trilogy is, probably those moments in that time, and he has a reason to go back, and maybe this adventure is what points him towards, what the Wayfinders are, and steering him towards Exegol and the Emperor.
Right. So he makes his way up to that point to the front gates of Vader's castle. In the midst of fighting those guys, the cultists, he does get nicked at some point. So he's got a little bit of blood. I mean, it wasn't just like a total victory. And thankfully, luckily, serendipitously, the blood drips down right in front of the stairs and opens the gates or the front door to Vader's castle, right? It cannot be opened but unless it's somebody of that legacy.
Right.
And so as he walks in, of course, if you've read any of the Vader's Castle comic books and stuff, all the imagery is very familiar. You should be very familiar to you. But he hears his voice, right, echoing through all of the halls here in that main entrance chamber saying, "I offer you welcome. Yes, you are very welcome indeed." There's almost an excitement about this, disembodied voice, at least for now. No pun intended there either. But disembodied voice. And out comes Vinny. And Vinny is like, so he's a character that's been in a number of the Vader's comics, the Vader's Castle comics. I think he was like in, I don't know, almost like 5 or 6 of those, if I remember correctly. But he's been this advisor to Vader. He's almost kind of like the main advisor, if you will, for Vader's Castle.
Yeah, most people remember him in Rogue One, right?
Oh, in Rogue One. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. No, that's a good point. I forgot he was in that. Same guy. Yeah, the thing about this is, and you tell me, and certainly if anybody's more up to date on this than I am, please let me know. I couldn't remember or explain why his head is now in a jar and it's like a bubble, essentially. I mean, if you know the Bomar monks from Return of the Jedi and the history around that, it's similar to that, where his head's kind of in a jar. It doesn't look like there's liquid. Maybe there is, but nonetheless, it's set on this like, I don't know, bulbous kind of body, like 4-legged creature thing, not like a spider.
It's almost like a mite of sorts, right?
Okay, I can see that.
Only 4 legs, but it looks like the body of like a ball of a mite with just these weird 4 legs. But
it's creepy as all get out, though.
It is. It's very different.
This is like Cavan Scott, right? Probably came up with this concept.
It does belong in Vader's castle, like without question. I don't recall anything happening to this character, but there's always a lot of material in between that I've probably not consumed, but it makes sense, right? We're many years removed from the end of the rebellion and then the end of Return of the Jedi. So we're 25 years or something like that, 20 plus years removed from all of that, and probably even a little bit further than that. So that this character would have potentially died and maybe wanted to continue on the legacy of his master until something like this. Again, when he's watching Kylo, come, he's speculating as to who this might be. Is it a pretender? Is it a plunderer? Or is it a prince? Right?
Yeah.
And so did Vinay really know the legacy of Vader and the potential of Vader having a legacy with Padme or not is an interesting question. My guess is probably not. But again, that he would have had to preserve his life if he believed so strongly that someone had to be the purveyor of the castle and keep it going after his death. Then you do whatever you have to keep going.
Yeah. And it's at this point that Kylo Ren sees him and threatens to kill him because, he is part of the legacy, right? And he's here to kind of wipe everything out.
Right.
And Vinay kind of challenges him and says, like, why would you want to kill me?
He calls him, "You foolish child," effectively.
Yeah. Very aggressively challenges him and asks him why he would do that. And Kylo says, well, because you're part of the legacy. And he goes on to tell him that, this legacy is what strangles me, right? It's keeping me back. It's holding me back. It's keeping me from my full potential. Of course, he's haunted by all of that. He says, the past strangles me, its expectations and legacies and vendettas. I will destroy every last vestige of it. I will free myself. And then Vinny's, this is where the hook is, right? This is the most intriguing piece of it. And where I'm like, okay, this is going to have a lot of potential. Vinny responds back, foolish, ignorant child. Vader's power was his past. And that's got to be like, I don't know if it's mind-blowing or eye-opening for Kylo Ren, but certainly he's been very consistent with destroy the past. So I do think that for him, this was kind of an eye-opening moment. It certainly was intriguing for him. Now he's more wants to know exactly, okay, what do you mean by all of that, right? but it's certainly going to be a different take for Kylo Ren if Vinny can get him to really understand that was what truly drove Vader's power, right? The same thing that we talked about earlier. It's that realization that in his mind, he needs to free himself of all of that anger. And Vinny's telling him, no, it's that anger that was what Vader harnessed in order to become as powerful as he was. And this is where the comic ends, right? It ends with he's basically him telling him, look, he can show him how to turn his past into power. And he tells Kylo that he's lost. Like he can clearly see that he's a lost soul at this point, that he's definitely out there.
Yeah, and this is the key difference, right? And I think when you look at Vader, he, like you said, he used his pain, he used his anger, he used the rage that came with all of that and kept it at the forefront. And the Emperor was always prodding and poking at it too, right? So we had a little bit of help in the scheme of things too, but Vader was resilient in that way. And I think that kind of speaks to Anakin as a character, was very resilient as well. And that's why he's able to maintain and sustain that and remind himself of the things that happened to him, the Obi-Wan Kenobi and the betrayal there, the betrayal of the Jedi, the
way they lost to the children, if you want to add that in there.
Well, the way that Windu treated him, the disrespect, there we go. So
for sure.
Disrespect from the council in many ways. All of these things just kept coming back. And then the Emperor's consistent betrayal, keeping it all in the forefront and reminding himself day in and day, and to an extent embracing it, but not letting it consume him in that way, was a delicate balance of sorts that he had to strike. Whereas Kylo Ren he thinks that all of that is holding him back and he's got to be better than all of that. But he truly doesn't understand the dark side because he's a child of the light, right? And it's the conflict of trying to be so hard to be something that you're genuinely not. And I think that's where he continues to struggle with that. So this is interesting. I'm with you. I think this was a really interesting take. It seems so simple and obvious when you hear it. Right. I think this is the beauty of what Charles Soule was able to do sometimes with just a very basic few lines of dialogue. You're like, well, yeah, of course, that makes total sense. It doesn't feel like it's anything earth shattering. And yet we're kind of talking about it in a respect of like, it's just this really different perspective, just slight shift that kind of brings you into focus as to what is purely different about these characters and why he has not been successful. But I think it also, is a proven fact of just where he comes from. And what Anakin came from was something a little more, I wouldn't want to call it sinister, but it was cultivated over time, where Kylo Ren was, maybe a little bit less so. And again, some other things kind of at play here with the family aspect, but a very interesting aspect, a great way to end the issue, like you said, though, a very good way to tease it and to set something up here to understand, like, what is it that Vene is going to show him that he could possibly start to move towards the character that we see in Rise of Skywalker, where it's all about embracing some of that aspect of him that he's been trying to shut down.
Yeah. The imagery here is really cool too, because not only when he's talking about Vader, he never looked back, but never let go either. This is why the dark side ran through him so strongly through him. He's broadcasting or beaming this like hollow of Vader, which is towering over Kylo Ren as well. So the symbolism there is actually pretty neat. And of course, this is enough for Kylo Ren. He's got his lightsaber ignited. He was about to kill him, and suddenly he just turns it off and says, "Show me," right? And so it ends with this, saying that we're going to Tatooine next. Surprise! We're always back to Tatooine. It's a running joke here on the show, running joke in Star Wars. But the return to Tatooine is teased as Kylo Ren seeks out the home planet of his grandfather, Anakin Skywalker. Number 2, the young tyrant must go up against Gardula the Hutt and her guards, and a Rancor, because everybody fights Rancors in Star Wars these days. Which I'm not dogging it, because I like seeing Rancor. And then what secrets to the past blow in the harsh sands of Mos Espa. I want to kind of, so I think we've already kind of talked our initial thoughts and kind of wrapped up how we felt about the comic book. I have not read the synopsis for issue 2, so I'm going to say stuff that probably doesn't make sense or wouldn't, is probably wrong. But the idea of him going back, Kylo Ren going back and seeing, I don't know, Shmi's burial or graveyard or whatever, her tombstone. I don't know if there's an opportunity for that. If he's going to be on Tatooine for a couple of episodes, maybe we get, more references. Maybe he's kind of going down the path of Anakin Skywalker's past, and Watto appears, or I don't know. There's a lot of possibilities here with him going back to. Maybe we get Hickster, or we're not. But anyways, as much as I loathe going to Tatooine for everything in Star Wars at this point, that's more me than you. I think I'm excited to see Kylo Ren's take and just what he brings to all of this, on top of everything else with, Gardula Hutt and Rancor and all that, because we got to have action. It can't just be a mystery kind of thing. But
well, I don't know that I'm that far off with you with Tatooine and Jakku. I think we go there a lot.
Jakku's not too bad yet, right? We haven't had 30 years of Jakku stories.
Well, I'm jaded in some ways that we talked about recently, but
you're relating the two because they're both sand planets. That's all. You're
maybe
conflating them.
I don't know.
Maybe
they're
not.
they're similar enough. So yeah, the solicits are out there for issues 2 and 3, so you can kind of get an idea of generally where the story is going if you want to. We won't spoil that for you if you want to go check that out. I think the interesting thing about Gardula, of course, is Anakin was a slave to Gardula the Hutt, right? So they were sold to them, both he and his mother. So there are certain aspects of that storyline that could be interesting of where they go. I just don't want them to linger. I don't want this to become this is your life.
This is your life, Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah, that type of thing of him trying to reclaim that. So I'm hoping there's something kind of tangible from each one that we pick up along the way that we feel is putting the pieces together about what we really need to know about Kylo Ren, and it just doesn't bog itself down. This is where I'm a little bit. If this is an ongoing monthly, and usually when you see the word ongoing with issues, is that this is not going to be a 4, 6, or 8 mini series. Usually this will run for a period of time, a year, maybe 2 years or something like that, right? So unclear let's see if we get some clarity around some of that in the coming issues or in the coming months. But I just really like how many side of these things are we going to go down, and how much of this are we going to explore to where it feels like maybe we're a little distracted from where Kylo Ren should be investing a little bit more in the First Order. I think some of that happens. If we see him kind of bouncing in and out of that, I think that makes a lot of sense of where the series goes as a whole. So again, some interesting avenues that we can explore here. I think him learning more about the truth of Darth Vader, and maybe by extension Anakin Skywalker, does have some interesting elements to it that I think could be well done. And Charles Soule, like we just talked about, has a knack for finding the interesting aspects of these stories and bringing us something that maybe weren't quite expecting. So there's reason for optimism in all of this, even if we're a little unsure about what the series will look like as a whole and how long that might go for.
Yeah, I was sitting here today trying to think, he's already telegraphed, I think, what the series is about. And don't get me wrong, there's going to be side stories and it's going to be more complex than this. But if you really boil it down, it is truly about trying to get Kylo Ren to realize that, hey, maybe his past isn't so bad. And I mean that, I'm using air quotes here, because it really is what's fueling him. And so in my head, I'd love to see him, learn more about Anakin's past, either through memories, holos, real life testimony, and, interactions with people that were a part of his past, whatever that is. And then be able to kind of see examples of his own life that mirrored that and reflected that, right? That would be interesting to kind of see that they've kind of lived very similar lives throughout the years, more than we were ever have been led on to believe or think. That would be intriguing. So however long it takes to do that, I think to kind of go back to what you were saying about where does this series go, how long does it need to be? I think as long as they keep that interesting and it keeps going and we kind of see him develop as a character because of that, then it needs to be as long as it needs to be. Whether it's 6 issues or 50 issues, I don't think it's going to be 50, but I could be wrong. 25 probably feels enough, especially with. But again, you never know with Charles Soule. He's able to take it and just keep going with it. So
right. Yeah.
I just want to go to this one last question here that was thrown in. Do you think Rey shows up in this comic? This is from One Up versus CPU.
No, I don't think so. I think it would take away from Kylo Ren, and I think honestly it would take away from their first new encounter in Rise of Skywalker if we brought them together here. But then again, we introduced Vader and Obi-Wan several times, and then Luke and Vader before. So there's things that can be rewritten in part of that history, but I don't think we'll see Rey. I don't think it makes sense. I mean, technically we saw Rey in this issue, right? So he's thinking about her. I think
Sure.
she appeared in maybe 2, maybe 3 panels. So clearly she's on his mind and she's a part of his story. So I think from that respect, she's definitely present. But this is very much the way that the Star Wars series and the Vader series were originally established is that This is the rebellion aspect. This is the Empire aspect. And I think this Legacy of Vader, Kylo Ren, is going to very much be from the aspect or from the perspective of Kylo Ren specifically, and maybe the First Order by extension. Unless there is a run-in with the Resistance or Rey specifically, then I don't see a reason for her to really show up unless it's more of a sensing thing. So it's possible. There are ways you could definitely do this, but I'm assuming that they will probably try to limit that to very few, if any, in that way. And Gary had a question out there too. Who owned Shmi before Watto? And that was Gardula the Hutt. So this was the last owner before Watto. She sold them to Watto.
Yeah, there's a line there.
But yeah, so what about you? Do you think Rey shows up beyond just these kind of flashbacks and mental hauntings of Kylo Ren?
No, and so I pulled this out. If memory serves me correct, in the novelization, the expanded edition by Ray Carson, I think it explicitly says in here that they had no communication for that year period. Like she had totally cut him off. And that was part of why, on top of everything else, it's something that he wanted, but he wasn't allowed to have because he could never connect with her again. She completely just closed up and put him on Do Not Disturb or Stop Force Time, FaceTime, whatever we were calling it at the time. So I think that's probably the case. I mean, they could change it because I think it was in the novelization only. So they certainly could do it. Well, again, I think at most
they could be in proximity and feel each other rather than the whole Force, like reach out and touch someone, the Force.
Yeah, or speaking to one another kind of thing.
So they could keep it true from a certain point of view. That's
what I'm saying. There's probably some wiggle room if they want to do it. I wouldn't be opposed to it. But to your point, I think I don't want to see too much of it because then it pulls away from what we're really trying to do here is get Kylo Ren to develop in a bad way so that he can finally have his little redemption there at the very end. So,
and all of his dialogue,
which was ouch, is Ben Solo in The Rise of Skywalker. Still compelling. A sore spot for me.
It's compelling, yeah.
Compelling dialogue, but
I think the novelization expanded upon that, didn't
it? Sort of, yeah. At the very end, there's some dialogue between after he's died, and they're kind of talking through the Force about how they'll always be together and et cetera, et cetera. But hey, if you're a Reylo man, that's good stuff. But it's the only way we got it. So
you know who I'm a Reylo for, Albert?
Who's that?
It's all of our amazing people in the live stream. Thank you all for coming out tonight. We certainly appreciate you coming. Special thanks to Andrew, Fall Asleep Fast, My Star Wars Guys, One vs. CPU, Alex, Gary, Sky, Steph, Steven Films, Music Train, Jorge. If I missed anyone, not intentional. Thanks for coming out. We certainly appreciate it. Thanks for joining us back. It's been a couple of weeks. So again, really enjoyed doing this with y'all, and we hope to see you again soon. KTATacast.com/YouTube if you are listening to the podcast. And once again, thanks for the download. Tell your friends.
Yeah. Don't forget to like and subscribe, like the video, subscribe to the channel, throw comments down there if you want. We'll get to those. We will answer those. And then again, we've got the Patreon show coming up this Sunday to be determined. We'll talk about that right after the show. But for Patreon members, we'll have a special show for you guys at 9 p.m. Central this Sunday.
Yeah. And, in the comments, leave us a comment about whether this is a book that you're interested in and wanting more on Kylo Ren, because the movies may have left something to be desired. So let us know what you're looking forward to in the series, or if there are things you think we need to see in Kylo Ren as it progresses. I know we have an endpoint to Charles Soule, apparently, with Albert Padilla, supposedly. Maybe not. I don't know. We have
Charles, if you're listening, thanks for listening. Thanks for the download, man.
Right. Yeah. But no, leave us a comment there. We'd love to see those and kind of hear your speculative thoughts and where it might go. And as the series progresses, we hope you're following this along with us.
Yep. All right, guys, we'll leave it there. And for Patreon members, we will see you guys on Sunday.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.